Um, Hello everyone. Yeah, I'm just gonna time myself because I don't want to go on too long. So yeah, I'm just going to introduce you to contemporary art practice second year, and I'm going to do this by thinking about, as Eddie said, what we've been doing for the last academic year, 2020-2021, which has obviously been a challenging one. And here we are. Yeah, so my name's Kate McLeod, and I'm co-leader of the second year contemporary art practice, and I co-lead with Ellie Harrison, my colleague, and so I'm sure you'll get to know her very well when you start in September. So we've been working as a team, and that's been really fantastic for us to work as a team this year. And yeah, we've had a lot to contend with, and so I was thinking about the questions that were sent out to you in advance of this session, and I started thinking about how I might respond to those questions from where I'm sitting. And so I wanted to start by, as Eddie said, talk about how we have worked within the pandemic and how we've worked through the lockdown as well, and how this has affected our teaching and learning at DJCAD. So, close that there. So yeah, we kicked off the academic year with blended learning, which most universities across the UK were also doing. So that's a combination of face-to-face teaching and online and computer-based activities. And the main thing about working this way was trying to work around and with social distancing. So social distancing meant that there was kind of limitations in terms of how many students could be in a studio or in a lecture theatre at any given time, and workshops as well. So we were having to sort of think about how we could get the most out of the situation with social distancing. And so I think we really started by thinking about how we might get the students to make the most of their studio making experience. And there's some lovely pictures on the side here of the studios and students working in the studios. And so because of social distancing and blended learning, the students were given a studio rota at the beginning of the academic year, which meant they only had, I think, a day and a half in the studio. And obviously, when you come in September, this won't be an issue anymore. There'll be a kind of normal way of working in the studio. We can have more numbers in the studio, so that won't be a problem. But it's actually been very interesting, because we were thinking about, well, the students are in the studio this time in the week. We really need to protect that time and make sure that they're getting the most out of that. So we started to think about how the visual research side of their practice, which is obviously a very normal aspect of the work, but often students would work in their studio and get books out of the library or journals, watch art films, and do that from their studio space. So we started to think about how we could separate these things out, so students were making the most of the visual research outside of the studio and then going into the studio to do the actual making. So we began to kind of establish this. And so really, it was making the most of the studio spaces, the workshops, and an opportunity to have face-to-face teaching as well, in the form of tutorials, seminars, and crits as well. And so we were doing that during semester one. And I think Eddie's obviously mentioned before, but the workshops at DJCAD are amazing. And I've only been working at the university now for about 2.5 years, but when I came for my interview, I was sort of blown away by the quality of the workshop. So it's kind of really important that we got the students to sort of understand the workshops, try as much as they could out in the workshops, and certainly meet the specialists during that time as well. But there has been some, that has been a little bit limited, obviously, this year. But when you come, we'll be back in those workshops again, and you'll be able to try them out. The things that moved online immediately were the other aspects. So critical and contextual lectures, the DJCAD amazing speakers program, which runs really interesting artists from all kinds of different disciplines and ways of making will come and speak to you about their practices. And all of that also moved online. Also, a lot of the library resources are online as well, although you could still access the library. That was, again, a kind of bookable system. So we were kind of having to sort of shift a lot of things and move them online at that time. And one of the other things we moved online was our weekly meetings, and that's something that we'd established before this academic year, but we would always have a second year contemporary art practice weekly meeting. So that's an opportunity for the entire year to get together with Ellie and I or other members of staff to do all kinds of things, actually. And I just want to kind of talk to you a little bit about those Monday meetings, because they've become really important as a way of the whole year gathering together. And so we'll deliver content, talks, we will have speakers from outside of DJCAD, art galleries or other arts organisations coming in and speaking to you during those times. We will also showcase student work, which I'll talk a bit more about in a moment, and also set various briefs, which I'll discuss in more detail. And the key thing during these Monday meetings, particularly in the first semester, was an opportunity for all the students to meet the support specialists, which of course will be something that's really crucial to you. As Eddie mentioned, those students coming from general foundation course also haven't met all of these studio and support specialists. So you'll all be having an opportunity to meet those people together. And so here we met all the specialists from here online this time. So each of the specialists would come into our Monday meetings and give a really thorough presentation about all of the different kinds of processes that the students could use, the different kinds of work they could make, the different kinds of facilities available to them, maybe examples of previous students' work and what they've done in those workshops. So digital photography and film, contemporary art practice workshop, which is more of a kind of general workshop where you might make stretchers for canvases, sculptural works, plinths, display mechanisms, anything out of wood. DJCAD Make, which is the digital make lab, 3D rendering software, 3D printing, CNC machines, all kinds of amazing digital making facilities in there. Print workshop, the sculpture workshop, which is bronze casting, plaster, welding, any kind of sculpture fabrication would go on there. And then DJCAD Clay, which is clay and ceramics, photography darkroom. And also we spoke to several different people from the learning and the library resources so that students could have a kind of understanding of how to use all of the online resources as well. And one of the things that came out of this time was that because of social distancing, not all of the students could be in the workshops at one time that we might have had before. So we set up a pop-up print workshop in the second year studios, and this is something that would definitely carry on with as well. So we had a press in there, various inks and different materials, and online videos and instructions that you could follow, so that really students could access this in a much more flexible way and be very experimental in print. And I feel like that went really well. So that was a great facility to actually have in the second year studios. And so one of the things that I think, in terms of thinking about what changed in terms of teaching during the lockdown, during the pandemic, was how we might think about sight, visual inquiry and field work as being something that might take place out of the studio. And I think this is always really interesting and important as well. When you're making work as an artist, it might be that you go out and do a performance in the city, and Clyde probably going to talk to you a bit about doing that as well. You might be doing kind of land art or collecting materials to make sculptures. I've also got an image here of a sort of gaming world. You might be interested in how you enter into those virtual reality worlds or those digital spaces as well, photographing the city, and really thinking about how students could maximise the creative work they were doing, not only in the studio but outside of the studio in the times when they couldn't be in there. And so to this end, we kicked off second year with a project brief that was called Instructions for a Derive. We gave a talk about the Situationists International and kind of went into kind of little art history talk around all of that. But briefly, what derive means is a kind of indeterminate wandering or walking, particularly around an urban space where you don't have any predetermined destination, you just wander around. And in fact, you might go into parts of the city that you wouldn't normally go into and sort of begin to document that experience. And so we did this project, I think it was just a 1-week project from start to finish. And students came up with really interesting work. And it was great as well because it meant that students could get to know the city if they perhaps weren't from Dundee or didn't know the city already. And yeah, students began to think about how to map the city, how they might find materials as they were going around, doing photography projects, making films, making performance works. And for a lot of students, that first brief led to making that they carried on with for that whole of that first semester. And so we really try and build in these bits of structure into the second year so that you can sort of establish yourself in the studio and get relaxed, and you're not just having to come up with all of your own ideas straight away, that you've got a bit of guidance and we can all be working around the same projects. And there was a collaborative element to that project as well that was quite interesting. So that'll be something that you'll find when you arrive in September, that there will be at least a kind of short project brief that you'll be following to sort of kick things off. And the studio community, and this was a kind of another question that I think was raised about how you feel about the studio environment, how you you know, what that means to you in this particular context that we find ourselves in. And for us in second year, as with all the years, after Christmas, we went into full lockdown. And so we were having to really think about how to teach online. Students were really having to think about how they could work from home, which was obviously really challenging in lots of different ways. But how crucially, how we began to think about establishing a studio community while we were online is using the virtual learning environment. So this is Blackboard Collaborate, which we're all on now. And so there will be a module page where you can go access all the kind of relevant information around the module guide, timetabling, reading lists, any kind of really useful information to do with the course will be put onto this site. And so we set up a second year virtual studio, and the other students may or may not agree, but I feel like that virtual studio really kind of picked up a pace in the second semester when we went into full lockdown, and students really began to populate that with images of their work. And I've got a few images that I just picked at sort of random when I went into the virtual studio yesterday. Laura Marie agrees. Good. Yeah, so students would also begin to put work in progress on here. So it's the idea that what are you missing when you're working from home? A lot. But one of the things that everyone agreed with, I think staff included, was just having that wander around the studio, seeing what people are doing, seeing those kind of works in progress, seeing little drawings or maquettes or models, things emerging in the studio spaces that people are working from. And so the virtual studio became a space where people could begin to be experimental and put things up that are in progress. They could write a little bit of text about it or just put an image, but then there's a sort of facility in there where people comment on each other's work. And so that was a kind of nice informal way students could discuss their work between them. And so you've just got some examples here of, again, people using site-based work in the city, drawing projects, sculptural projects, they're using different materials. Again here, someone starting a print project and just beginning to photograph the plate and discuss what it is that they're going to do, people posting videos that they've made on there. So this is that became a really good space for students to go, and also staff, to see what was going on and to see what students' work was like from other academic advisor groups, because you would be put into an academic advisor group. I had a group of students, for example, and we would all share work online in meetings, in Collaborate, or on Microsoft Teams, a different platform. And so that group of students would get to know their work quite well, but it was an opportunity also to see what the whole year was up to. So that was work that started to work really, really well. And also we started to showcase work during those Monday meetings that I mentioned before. So students, possibly more finished works that students wanted to showcase in a kind of exhibition of their work online. So we had quite a lot of people showing videos, but also paintings and any kind of work that they'd photographed. We showcased those on certain Monday meetings. So that was a good opportunity again for students to show each other what they've been up to. And then I'm not entirely sure how well used this was in the end, but we also started to think about how we could set up a space in Collaborate where students could drop in to the course room and just have a chat. So rather than it being fully structured around the work, it might be that you just want to chat about anything. You just want to have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and have a chat with each other about the work or about anything else, really. So it was sort of setting up those opportunities for students to be able to communicate with one another by chance, a bit more like how it would be in a studio environment. So I'm going to speed up a little bit because I've talked quite a long time, but we also did quite a lot of projects online. And I just want to talk to you about a couple of these, one of which is a staff research-led workshops. This is something that we would always do, so this is something you will definitely experience. But we all have our, obviously, research interests and our practices. We're all practicing artists, and so we designed workshops around those interests. So you can see a list here of all the different kinds of workshops that we led, and they might be similar to workshops we've run in non-COVID times, but now they all had to move online. So we offered students a sound workshop, hacking the archive and film workshop there, sort of interventions in public space and more of a kind of performance workshop. This was mine. Junk space, a sculpture workshop, a bookmaking workshop, and printing without a press. So all of us thinking about how we might move our workshop or learning skills or developing practice within that context to things that students could actually do from home as well. And I just wanted to talk briefly about the workshop I did, because it was a completely new workshop, but in some ways it was similar to the kind of workshops I might have run before. But instead I was asking, a bit like the Derive project, asking students to go out and sort of scavenge and find materials that they could bring to this online workshop. And then I gave a kind of contextual talk where I introduced them to lots of different artist practices, and we started to think about how they could go away and make things. So it was a one-day workshop. So the students went away with these materials they'd found. There was various online discussions, and then they came back and we shared the work. And so I've got a few images of these amazing kind of objects that students made out of kind of things they'd found on the beach, things they'd found probably in their bedroom, you know, little bits of clay and a crab claw there, bits of sort of natural material, cardboard. So they really just had a kind of playful experimental day that we came together and we discussed the work, and that went really well. And that was similar to a workshop I'd run the year before in the plaster room at DJCAD, and there's a kind of couple of little images there you can see of the workshop where students would bring materials into the workshop and play with them and put them together and stick them together using plaster and casting kind of processes as well. So I just wanted to show you that as a kind of comparison to how we move things online, and also how it might be more similar to your experience when you arrive in DJCAD, and how we'd be using the workshops as well. And this is just another image that I found of, again, working with students in the workshops. So this is a project that I did, again, just a day-long workshop, working in the clay workshop, I think this was actually for a third year module, but this is something that I like to work closely with the workshops and get students in and actually kind of play with materials, always sort of contextualizing it with some kind of lecture prior to that workshop as well, and setting certain parameters. And often these workshops that I've just been talking about would be sign up, so you can sign up to the one that's most interesting for you. And then the other thing that the students have been doing this year, which has been fantastic, has been a fantasy exhibition project. So because we've not been able to curate exhibitions in the actual building, we started thinking about how we would make an exhibition of any kind of artist in any kind of location you could possibly imagine. And so students worked in groups to propose these kind of exhibitions, and then they presented those in the Monday meetups, and we were really blown away by that work. They really work very well in groups online to propose these amazing exhibitions, most of which we'd really love to see. I can't show you any images of those yet because we haven't got all the presentations in for assessment, but yeah, they were really excited. And again, we were using online tools to kind of do voting, have a system of voting, so students could begin to vote for the themes that they were most interested in. So we ended up with, after a kind of process of working, collaborating as a big group, we narrowed down a list of themes that students would like to curate exhibitions, these fantasy exhibitions around. So we had memory, dreams, contrasts, nature, living spaces, queer experience, liminality, disconnection, collections, social class, neurodiversity, and fiction. So a whole range of kind of amazing themes that the students came up with themselves to work around, to use as a kind of ground to then propose exhibitions, and that worked really, really well, and that was very interesting in terms of a research exercise as well. And I haven't talked about all the projects we've done, but just Eddie mentioned that we did the summer project, so we will be setting you a summer project later in the year. I think we did set it in July last year, and this project was called Alter, Replace, Improve, and it was about proposing an adaptation to a monument. And this was really work that we looked at off the back of the Black Lives Matter protest movement and the tearing down of the Edward Colston statue in Bristol, and we started to think about how and what a monument is, what it's for, and then asking students to go out in the world and not necessarily engage with a sort of colonial discourse around monuments, but actually just to go out, see what kind of public art was on their doorstep, how they felt about it, what the history of it was. And it was a really fantastic and interesting, thought-provoking, quite challenging sometimes project for us to do. And students kind of engaged in it in different sorts of ways. So I've just got a few images here. Some people made little sculptural maquette, drawings in sketchbooks, some filmmaking, kind of performative works. Someone made a t-shirt as well. So it's like a really wide range of different kinds of work that came out of that. Some people had a lot of time over the summer to really go to town and make a little sculpture. Some people had a lot of work or other commitments over the summer, and so they made proposals in their sketchbook. So it was a wide range of projects, but it was all really fascinating work. And so that also kick-started our year discussing that work and looking at what everyone had done. And then one of the questions as well I wanted to respond to was things that you'd like to keep from lockdown teaching. And I was thinking about that. What have we learned or taken on board during this time that we'd like to keep? And so I thought the virtual studio, actually, for sharing and commenting on work, I don't know how well used that would be in a normal studio environment when we're all actually in the studio. But I was thinking that that is quite a nice way of students sharing work and a kind of informal critique that happens. So I'd be interested in seeing about that being used. Also, online tools for student voting and participation, as I've shown you. I think that's been working really well, as working as a big collaborative group, and how we could use those kind of digital tools for projects. I think that's been really good. And then also recording certain talks. So all of the critical and contextual talks and all of the speakers programs have been recorded, and that has been, just on a personal level, that's been amazing for me, because a lot of those artist talks that I would have loved to have gone to weren't necessarily on the days that I was working or I was teaching at the time. So it's been an opportunity for me to actually listen to all those talks, and they've been really, really great for me as well. So I definitely want to keep that aspect of what we've taken from lockdown teaching. And that's me. Sorry if I went on too long.
Okay, thanks very much. And I will hand you on to Lauren Marie, I think, our student. And
Hi.
Lauren, hey, Lauren who arrived as a direct entry student into second year, so you'll have the experience of what was it like arriving into Dundee, joining this new kind of peer group of students who had already known each other and adapting to DJCAD.
Yes, thank you. I've got some notes here, so just to avoid being kind of looking down a lot, I'm just going to switch my camera off. One sec, guys, and get this PowerPoint up. Okay, great. So hi, my name's Lauren Marie. I'm a second year fine arts student, and today I'll just show you some of the work that I've made over the past year and talk a little bit about my experience so far and why I think you'd really enjoy studying at Dundee. One of the great things about DJCAD is it's multidisciplinary, which allows you to develop a real understanding of different techniques and processes. For myself, it's enabled me to focus on my own area of interest, which is animal rights and veganism. As Kate mentioned, there's a couple of projects that you're given briefs for, but a lot of the time you will run the briefs yourself. So it kind of helps you be a bit more self-aware and self-motivated. And it might sound a bit scary, but it does give you a lot of freedom. So as you can see, I've done a lot of performance, installation, temporary installations, and it's been all about the dairy, egg and meat industries. My work's very conceptual, and more recently I've been experimenting with sound and film to just enhance my message that bit more. So on the left there is a still from a film piece that I made, and I've definitely discovered more about myself as an artist thanks to this multidisciplinary approach. To kind of echo what Eddie was saying there, I don't think coming in at second year has been any more, like I've not felt like I missed out at all by not doing the general foundation degree. I'm not a student, well, I'm not living in student accommodation at Dundee, I'm in Falkirk, so I just commute to Dundee, which I've found is absolutely fine, and it's pretty easy to get there and find your way around. So second year is really just about exploring your own practice a bit further, being experimental and having fun. I think just trying to think of this time last year when I was in your shoes, the main reason that I chose Duncan and Jordanstown was because of the facilities. I knew that they were great, so these are just some of the various workshops and departments I've been to. I went to the textile studio as shown here. Everything's provided for you, and that's covered in your studio fee. And we even have our own art store in one of the buildings that you can go to get any supplies that you might need. So if you're a bit like myself and you go through sketchbooks quite quickly, that can be handy. And I've also tried out laser cutting, which is just a really cool process to watch. You can see the beam from the laser on the right there. So it starts out as like an Adobe Illustrator drawing, and you print it onto your material. I just used MDF here. So there's loads you can get involved in. It doesn't need to be like if you consider yourself a painter, it doesn't mean that you can't explore these techniques too. And I've also worked in the clay facility quite a bit, just to try and do something new, like why not, you know? And the great thing about the online learning is that there was an optional kind of thing that you could go to life drawing, virtual life drawing, which I took part in. It's just really good for developing your drawing skills, and the classes were run every week, which was quite convenient too. I also just want to share with you some of the opportunities that you can get involved in. Oh, that's going a bit dodgy, that image there, but we'll roll with it. Yeah, so I'm a member of the student curatorial team, which is run by our own Cooper Gallery. And essentially you can learn about curating, and you can collaborate with other students from different year groups and across many different disciplines. So for my group's project, we created some postal art, and this is my postcards that I designed on the left there. I'm also a founding member of InGear, which is a student research group, and on the right was our very first conference a few weeks ago, and I gave a talk to students and staff about my area of interest and research that I had done. So it just goes to show that if you want to, there's so many different things you can be a part of, and it helps enrich your experience and kind of helps your confidence as well. It certainly helped me get to know people that were like-minded and make friendships too. So I don't know how many of you will be Harry Potter fans, but I wanted to include this and just say that help will always be given at DJCAD to those who ask for it. And it's so true, like the staff are so friendly, they're so approachable, and as they were saying there, you get an advisor of study who will support you throughout the full year, and they'll arrange group crits, presentations, tutorials, just to help you evolve that wee bit more. And they're practicing artists too, so they've got a wealth of knowledge of fine art, which is even better because you get to meet different people and different practices, and you can, if you've even got an idea, you can go to them, run it by them, and someone will definitely be able to help you make that a reality. So if you're still unsure, I would say, you know, do your research. It has to be right for you in the end where you choose to go to study next. However, if you do choose Duncan of Jordanson, you'll be choosing one of the recognised Scottish art schools. You'll be choosing somewhere with outstanding facilities, and we have our own gallery next door, which is amazing. And the degree programme is tried and tested, so I think it's fair to say that there's great prospects after you graduate as well. And yeah, I hope that's been useful. I'll try and answer any questions that you might have. If you want to check out any more of my work or shoot me a message, you can find me on Instagram at The Compassionate Artist. And yeah, I'm happy to help where I can. And I just want to finally say congratulations on being selected for a place here. Hope to see some of you around the studios in future. And thanks for listening.
That was brilliant. Thanks very much, Lauren Marie.
Thank you.
I want to go. I want to go to Dundee now. Clyde, are you okay for giving a presentation or chat about your experience over the last year? And you've had 2 years in DJCAD, so you could advise the students what it was like moving from first year and having these new students coming as direct entry students and how they benefit or enhance the peer group in a sense, don't they?
I know I've been trying to escape for 2 years, but no one's let me leave, so it's been really difficult. Can you all hear me okay? Because I'm masked up.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm...
No,
okay, good. That's perfect. So I'm going to get my presentation up. So if you just bear with me. Can everyone see that okay?
It hasn't arrived here, but my broadband's a bit slow. If somebody else can...
I can see it.
Yes, yeah. Okay, brilliant, thanks.
That's working okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so my name is Clyde, and I've been at Duncan and Jordanson since first year. And I suppose I was really lucky because I had a normal first year. So in some respects, I feel quite guilty, but I'm very grateful for that. And yeah, I loved first year. I learned so much, and I met so many people. But then what I noticed when I came into second year, despite of COVID, was that it really was a level playing field. You know, everyone was on the same level. Everyone's new to the same thing. Nobody really knows what they're doing. So I thought it was really exciting, and I think everyone was a wee bit unsure. So there's a nice kind of community in that sense, and especially hopefully for you guys when you're actually in the studios and things are a bit more normal. So I think you're going to enjoy it. And I think what I was going to do is just run you through the direction that my work has taken kind of since coming into second year. And I suppose in first year, I was really just experimenting. I was making a lot of sculpture. I was drawing a lot. I was making quite big work. But then coming into second year, I thought it would be interesting to talk about the second semester when we've been purely in lockdown, and the way that I've kind of used that as an opportunity to become a performance artist and to go out and to utilize the people and the public spaces to really kind of adapt to the situation that was far from ideal. So the best way that I could describe myself is that I'm trying my very best to make my artwork a part of everyday life, and I myself want to become a part of everyday life. I think I create an energetic, spontaneous, and engaging response to both the joys and the pains of real lives, real people. So I'll flick through some of my work from this year, and the first one that we're looking at is when the snow came in February. And I made a film where I explored Dundee and the buildings of DJCAD, because at this time we're still locked out of the buildings, we're not allowed in. So I was constantly exploring the areas around Dundee, but on skis. And this is one where I skied into the city centre, and I had a group of kids that were there take me to the ground with snowballs and just attack me, ambush me. And that's me just really kind of trying to get to know the people that are there and bringing metaphors of mountains and of struggle into the city. And this is me standing beneath a leaky gutter in winter and just getting completely soaked outside the library. And I'm really just sort of darting around the city using myself to create metaphors. And this is me climbing. I tried to climb as much of the buildings of DJCAD as I could, and I made a film about it, and I've been climbing walls and some of the structures as well, and this is just an example. In this one, I approached a skateboarder and I asked if I could chase him with a piece of chalk, and I just mimicked his lines exactly, and I just tried my best to keep up with him. And I suppose what this is suggesting is that my work is kind of bringing back the metaphor of struggle and trying in incredibly difficult times. And this is me running up and down a set of stairs that lead to a big Tesco. And I was trying to see how many times I could do this in an hour. And it came out as 46.5 times going up and down. And all the while, some guys were building a fence. So this is me just sort of trying to mimic a mountain, but within the context of a city. And this is a still from a film called Getting Through, where I just squeeze my body through different parts of the city and kind of bring back the idea of where art fits into this strange situation and how we're all just kind of trying to muddle through. And this is me making space in bins and compacting. This is me racing some guys up the hill in between the two buildings of DJCAD. They were just there training, and they let me join in with them, and they let me have a race. This is me dancing to a raindrop. There was another leaky gutter, and I was dancing to the rhythm of the water, and I made a film out of it. in this piece, I'm fixing the streets of Dundee. I noticed that there's a lot of traffic islands with sort of bricks that had come up through the pressure of the cars. And I went around the city just sort of fixing different parts of them, just on my own. And this is a series that I started called This Way, That Way, in which I'm using the idea of day-to-day decisions that we all make and really just coming back to that sense of the everyday. And what I did was I went out at night and I wrote This Way, That Way on the street until the police came. And sure enough, about half an hour later, the police came and they told me to go home. And in this piece, I was following the movement Reclaim the Streets after the issues that arise to do with women's safety. And I made a project called Together with Women, in which I wrote this phrase consistently in different parts of the city and followed the movement around the city and just kind of trying to represent the male voice in this issue and sort of become a role model in about the way that the issue should be tackled and how men have a part to play in the issue. And what happened was that the bandstand in Magdalen Green became a location, and it was a kind of an amazing sight. There was ribbons and there were signs that were harmlessly tied to the bandstand, and then one night they all disappeared. So my good friend Jade and I, we went back to the bandstand at night and we went up on ladders and we hung signs really high around the bandstand, almost like when your mum puts something on top of the fridge. And then the next day I went back and I went to check on the signs, and I made the mistake of telling some locals that I was responsible. And what happened was that I was ambushed by about 4 or 5 old people until they didn't let me leave until the police came. And then the police came, and then this opened a huge discussion, a huge argument about the idea of vandalism and the idea of the message that I was putting across. And then these difficulties with authority that I've been having in my work also refers back to a manifesto of mine from the first semester, which I called The Signs of Hope. And I really just went out into Dundee with a sign of hope and gave people very small signs of hope until I was challenged by the authorities, which was 2 members of the city council that came and told me to kind of clear off. But in the end, they were really nice about it and they actually enjoyed what I was doing. But it was just causing a small disruption in the systems that are kind of ingrained within the city. And in these pieces, I went out with chalk and I used the blank places where graffiti had been painted over. And I was just creating messages that were sort of indirect messages of hope. They could have been considered to be at the city, someone specific, people in general, but I really just wanted to make people stop and think about the message and consider whether or not it was directed at them. And that's similar with these drawings as well. And then in one of my most recent works, I went out into the city and became part of the furniture of the city. And I cut a head hole and 2 leg holes in a rug that blended in with the colour of the concrete. And really I just became part of the furniture. And I encouraged people to just walk all over me. And so many people walked over me, people cycled over me, jumped over me, jumped on my stomach. And what I really felt was that I was actually becoming part of my own ideas in the sense that I was becoming part of the city. And, you know, there was this sort of childish sense of play that was coming out in people. And a kind of sense of confusion as to what this guy's doing. And then to finish up, this is what remained, was just a print on the concrete of my sweat after the performance. And I think this kind of symbolizes where my work has gone, in the sense that I no longer make much material work, in the sense that I really strive to form relationships and I strive to form kind of disruptions within people's lives and just becoming a part of everyday life. And I think that's what this picture sort of symbolises. So if I was to give any advice, what I would say is to just kind of expect everything. Because I went into second year with no idea where my work was going to go. And then now approaching the end of second year, it's gone in a completely radical direction, but I'm so glad it has. But I wouldn't have got there without the sort of trials and the tribulations of picking my way through. And a good example was the other day I was going to meet my friend, and I walked through an alleyway, and there were 3 characters using an anonymous substance. But then I was called over by them. But I was called over by my name. And they just wanted to tell me how much they enjoyed my performance and how much they enjoyed kind of being given artwork to them, and how they felt that art becomes a sort of alienated subject, but they felt that they could really be part of it and they could really enjoy it. So that was a really fulfilling experience for me. But what I always say is that my art won't change your life, but it might change your day. And sometimes that's all that matters. So really that's kind of all I wanted to get across, was that it can just be a great opportunity to meet people and to make friends and just to sort of try something new. Because that's really what I did, and I think I'm so glad I did. And if I was to touch on some of the opportunities that have come through second year, I've become part of a reuse hub in which we're trying to start a sort of mini organisation where waste material can be reused in a sort of barter shop sense. Myself and another student are organising an exhibition of manifestos from the first semester, which is students' work. Myself and another student are both class reps, where in meetings with Edu we sort of voice any problems and concerns that anyone in the year is having. And also with the graduate run kind of gallery space called Generator, which is just up the road from Duncan and Jordanston, they're opening another branch in the Wellgate shopping centre, which is just in the city centre. And what they're starting to do now is they're looking for new members of their committee, and they show work from the members. And I think it's a really great opportunity to jump on, just to sort of put yourself out there and show work, other artists as well. So yeah, I think that's all that I have to say.
Thanks very much, Clyde. You made my day. Maybe it changed my life. I mean, who knows? But I think this is and it's lovely having Lauren Marie and yourself talking about your experiences. And I can only credit the amazing staff that I've had the opportunity of working with, Kate and Ellie and all the staff in there that's given you the confidence and freedom and to keep you going and together as a peer group through these really difficult times. It's really very challenging year that we've had. I've been so kind of impressed with the kind of the work that's coming out of second year, but the kind of the work that, in a sense, the staff are putting in to keep the student peer group together and keeping optimism and liveliness and debate and activism and making going, which is quite an incredible thing.